guys are all just like really misogynistic.
How do you define misogyny?
I don't know. I don't like this.
I'm just asking how you define misogyny. Are you okay? Like, do you want to go as in leave?
Do you ever just like look at a man and feel annoyed? Like they're literally just existing. They technically haven't done anything. And you're like, I just feel so just...
Feminism is rooted in the struggles of ordinary women. It's
Okay, guys, I'm just testing my pause, but that's strong starts here. Obviously, these are some quite extremist views from these particular people here, but interesting start.
That, you know, women often get paid less. It's about the fact that women are on the front line of some of the hardest sectors to work in care, in our healthcare system, in social care. It's about the fact that they do so much unpaid labour in the household.
How many female bricklayers do you know?
I mean,
female bin cleaners.
Great question.
What are you talking about?
Feminism is a scam. A few years ago, I was an angry, blue-haired feminist. I once believed that male privilege was real and that I was a victim of the wage gap. Now that I understand the true motives of feminism, I know that this could not be further from the truth, and that modern-day feminism is a war on true masculinity.
The movement of feminism is the ultimate example of not choosing your enemies wisely. You chose men as being the enemy. 40 years later, 50 years later, you're 65 years old, single, not married, no kids. You're living in an apartment or a condo with a dog or a cat. That's all you ever talk about, and you're lonely, and you're sitting there saying, I was wrong. Men are not the enemy. But guess what? That movement stole 50 years of your life. You know how painful that is?
Modern day feminism says that women should be out in the workforce working 40+ hour weeks while their children stay at home with a caretaker, that they immediately get put in the school system from age 5 and stay until they're 18. I'm sorry, but that.
So you're the Rockefellers in the mid-1900s and you have a big problem. Your corporate empire was bigger than ever, you have your tentacles all over the American economy and government, but the problem is your empire has grown so vast, so large, that you've ran out of cheap labor to keep the empire growing. After all, an empire takes a lot of manpower to sustain and grow. You had already invented the American public school system to pump out obedient workers, but not even that was enough. We have a video on that if you want to learn more. You needed more labor than even America's public schools could provide. But where on earth could you possibly find millions of people right here and now to...
Okay, guys, straight off the bat, the vibe I'm getting is this is an economic issue. It's not like a spiritual, philosophical issue. It's not like from this documentary. It's like that's the kind of vibe I'm getting so far. It's starting off really, really strong, and this guy is going into the Rockefellers, which is a very, very interesting topic. Talking about the Rockefellers, because they basically shaped the entire industry of America and the way we do things, the way schooling systems happen, the way everything basically happens is because of the Rockefellers. So, interesting way to start this doco.
Start working. To become your underpaid factory workers, cleaners, cooks, bookkeepers, secretaries, salespeople. And that's when it hit you. That's when you realized the answer you were looking for was staring at you right in the face this entire time. Women. Ah yes, women. Think about it, back in the 1900s, women didn't work. Only a tiny percentage of women had jobs outside of their homes. That meant that half of America's entire potential workforce was not working. And why would they want to work? Their husbands made more than enough money to support them. And in general, women naturally care more about love flowing through their relationships than they do about conquering the world and making money. Most women could...
Okay, so he's talking about, he's generalizing here, obviously. So there obviously are niches of women and men who don't fall in this category. So keep that in mind, guys. I think he's talking about in a broader sense what his opinion on women at the moment.
Could do the work in oil fields and coal mines and factories and offices if they had to, but are they gonna be happy? Are they gonna be in their element? Probably not. But if you could somehow convince women to leave their families behind and enter the factories, fields, and offices instead, well, you would solve your labor problem once and for all, wouldn't you? But how do you convince women who have never been employed, never had to clock in or out, never had to answer to a corporate boss? How do you convince these women to leave their home, leave their family, leave their freedom to come work for you for a meager wage instead? Well, you gotta convince women that all those things that they love, all those things that they hold sacred, having kids, raising kids, homemaking, things that women have been doing since the beginning of time, these aren't good things, these aren't empowering things. No, the only reason you're doing them is because men are forcing you to. The patriarchy wants you to be submissive, to keep you dependent on them. They think you're...
Wow, okay, so first things first, I'm going to say one thing. If you haven't studied the story of Alexander the Great's mother Olympia, definitely do that. And what you'll get out of it is, over our 10,000 years of recorded history, women have been quite powerful in their own way, basically driving civilization, driving the entire cultures. Yes, men have typically been the warriors, the kings, the ones in charge, but don't get it wrong and don't get it twisted. There have been plenty of warrior queens in, for example, ancient Greece and African ancient civilizations and other civilizations, even in Asia, who have done some pretty extraordinary things. I mean, like going to war, going to legit fight with their men to war. So yeah, I can somehow, I get the vibe. I think what he's trying to say is that modern feminism has made it seem like women in our entire human history have always been put down, have always been like basically this useless weaklings. And I just don't, I mean, there's definitely been elements of that. Of course there has been, because of the war and the nature of warrior and the nature of masculine male dominance physically. But in saying that, there also has been this extraordinary powerful female leadership in its way that is hard. It's very nuanced and it's hard to like even sometimes realize. But yeah, don't get it twisted. Women are powerful and women have been a huge driving force in civilization. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And if you need more proof of that, go study Olympia, probably one of the greatest women to ever live, in my opinion. Definitely one of the most impressive leaders generally ever to live. And Alexander the Great's mother. Oh, what an amazing person. In a crazy way. You gotta suss it out.
You're too weak, too dumb to do the same jobs as men. They think your place is in the kitchen. No, you gotta reject the patriarchy and opt in for our patriarchy instead. You gotta get a 9 to 5, have a career. You gotta do all the labor and pay all the taxes that come with it. You gotta reject all the things that make you feminine and compete with the men instead. Or in other words, you as the Rockefellers needed to co-opt the feminist movement.
Actually, I just had that thought. Think about this, right? So the whole idea of the feminist movement and the workforce and having women work and staying away from the home and the tax system, like women finally being taxed and then having to do all these things that men typically had to do. It was driven by, like, if there is a patriarchy, which lots of feminists believe, then the patriarchy, and they're always in control, the patriarchy would only allow something like this to happen if they wanted this to happen. So in their own nuanced way, from what it appears and what I'm kind of gathering from this is that if men are always in power, then men want this to happen. So it's a lose-lose situation. Because if it was stayed that way, men were still in power, the family man, but now it's the corporate men who are in power. So men are still in power according to the feminist movement in its own twisted way. So instead of having your power more micro in your family with your husband or the father, it's now gone to the corporate man, the corporate business, the patriarchy, the capitalistic system, the dominant tyrants of the socialist movements or the communist movements. It's still men in power. So it's a really weird thing to think about, actually. I've never thought about it like this before.
You needed to convince women that the real empowering thing is to become a wage slave. Yes, that is right. The same Rockefellers who were behind America's education system also helped the feminist movement blow up. Just listen to what director Aaron Russo said about Nicholas Rockefeller telling him about how his family created the women's liberation movement.
You talk and he started laughing. He said, Aaron, what do you think women's liberation was about? I said, I had pretty conventional thinking about it at that point. I said, I think it's about women having the right to work, getting equal pay with men, just like they won the right to vote. And he started to laugh and said, you're an idiot. We, the Rockefellers, funded that. We funded women's lib. And one reason was we couldn't tax half the population before women's lib. And the second reason was, now we get the kids in school at an early age. We can indoctrinate the kids how to think.
Oh, no shit. Like, okay, I'm playing along with this doc at the moment because it's the whole point of the reaction, right? It makes sense. If you take the woman out of the house, the kids have to go to school earlier. The government get to indoctrinate the kids earlier, and also half the population wasn't being taxed. So if I was like the patriarchy masculine leader of corporate world, and I was the man in charge, I would be like, yes, this is a great thing. It makes like if you think about it in that way, if you simulate in that way, yes, it makes a lot of sense. It's actually it's kind of genius, actually. Oh my God.
It breaks up the family. Kids start looking at the state as the family, not as the parents teaching them.
And it worked. Slowly but surely, women started believing that maybe being a housewife isn't all that great. Maybe they do want to work in factories and offices just like men. Maybe that's where all the satisfaction and happiness is, and that men have just been hiding it from them. And just like that, everything changed. With women at work, no one was around to cook healthy meals, so American families started eating more and more processed junk food. Suddenly, now double the amount of Americans were going to college and getting into mountains of debts, making the banks even richer. Suddenly, now the government could tax double the amount of people. And while their mommies were too busy at work, kids as young as 5 were now being...
So, I've got a solution. So, obviously, don't make this a gender thing. Let's have to be women and men. Obviously, men have their own powers, women have their own powers. But make this, if it could go back to just one person works, one person stays home. It doesn't matter if it's a man or a woman. Like, you guys get to decide that. Everyone gets to decide who stays home. Then that way, it brings back at least one person in the home who can do the cooking, cook healthy, you know, look after the kids. And, you know, and obviously that person isn't taxed. They don't have to worry about that, blah, blah, blah. But obviously that doesn't suit the elites because they want factory workers, they want workers, they want more people to be taxed. The government wants more people control. They want kids at school earlier. Yeah, so it won't work because the system wouldn't allow it. The system wants everyone working, basically, and they want kids at school young because it starts the process of indoctrination much easier. Oh, this is a tough one.
Being sent into America's public school system. And when those kids graduated from public school, well, they'll be perfectly molded, perfectly conditioned to repeat the cycle all over again. Now, I'm sure that some of you are probably thinking, but Jake, you're just cherry picking the bad stuff. Look at all the good feminism has done for women. There are now more women than men in most colleges. Women are now the breadwinners in almost half of the heterosexual marriages in America. There are more women in the workforce today than ever before. And yes, that is true. And yes, I believe in equal opportunity for all. Of course women should be able to vote and work. Of course women shouldn't be abused or anything like that. If women want to hustle and make money, more power to them.
I think this is going to my point. I think it shouldn't be like a man or woman thing. It should just be a person selects thing. So one person works, one person doesn't work. Doesn't matter on the gender. So whoever is really... I mean, we could just give it a go. I'm not saying it will work, but we just give it a go, surely.
I have an extraordinary amount of female friends like this. But it's also important to ask the question, is this push for hyper-masculine, hyper-independent women, girl bosses, no kids, casual sex, birth control, women who are just as much a slave to the rat race as men? Is this what actually makes women happy and satisfied with life? Is this push for more masculine women, which therefore creates more feminine men, really good for everyone? Or is it just leaving men and women more confused and frustrated than ever before? For some women, this is probably right for them. But the numbers don't lie. On average, women today are unhappier than they were 40 years ago. On average, when compared to the 1970s, women feel even less satisfied with their lives today. So maybe, just maybe, the feminist movement has done a lot of good for women's rights, but they've also done a whole lot of damage.
She gets up and she says, Patrick, this is very hard for me to say this. She says, ever since in high school, I wanted to prove to men that I can beat them. So when I graduated high school and college, I opened up my salon. We do very well. I've made millions of dollars. My people and my work that work at the salon, they do very well for themselves. I drive a nice car, I have a nice house, I have money, I have millions. I don't worry about any of that stuff. You know what decision I made last night? I said, what's that? She says, I want a husband. I no longer want to compete with men. I need them. And I'm like, what? She's saying this in front of 2,000 people with her sister sitting right next to her. Wow. And now she's getting emotional. How many 65-year-old women do we have to hear saying that I marched with the feminist movement and I bought into the fact that men are the enemy? I've never been married. I'm alone and I'm miserable and I wish I would have never bought into that philosophy.
Through movies and media, we're taught that working for the man, climbing the corporate ladder and paying tax is more empowering and valuable than raising the next generation. Women have lost touch with our natural loving instincts and birth rates are plummeting.
You had mentioned in your TikTok a while back that you were previously...
I'm trying to say one thing is certain: birth rates are plummeting. I just saw a tweet by Elon Musk recently. The Greece where my parents are from, and my ethnicity, my DNA is from. Greece's birth rates are plummeting to an alarming rate. Same in Japan. It's happening all across the Western world, actually. So yeah, there is some truth in what this is being said right now.
A raging feminist. So you want to tell me about that?
Yeah, for sure. It's hard not to laugh when I look back at that chapter of my life. But basically, I came from a background in circus performing, so I was really surrounded in an environment where the scene was like artsy and liberal, and I was that perfect archetype of angry, blue-haired feminist that was just so angry at the world and so angry at the men in my life. And I've now come to the conclusion that I didn't actually reach those conclusions myself. You know, it was just like a product of the environment that I was in and the beliefs that were kind of repeated to me. And yeah, I really got swept away in this like angry, resentful view of the world. And now, a few years later, I've come full circle, like left behind that ideology and realized what a victim mentality I kind of got swept up in.
This is Shannon Michaela, by the way, the former feminist from the clip we played earlier. She makes great content. I'll link to her Instagram and Twitter below. So stay dangerous, subscribe for more, and this is the lie that is feminism.
There we go, guys. So we're almost 10 minutes in. Bit of a recap. So basically what he's arguing is, what this doco has said basically so far is that the Rockefellers realized that half the population wasn't getting taxed, half the population wasn't working. And if they could get females into the workforce, they could tax more people, they could have more workers, and they can also get kids into the schooling system earlier. And also then families and people will become more reliant on big food, fast foods, which is easier to sell. So it would like kind of continue this rat race. So yeah, according to everything that's been broken down so far, the Rockefellers stemmed all this. And yeah, it's basically... it's a money thing, and also nothing has really changed. The system is still patriarchy. The males still make the decisions. The Rockefeller males still made the choice for the females and pushed it through marketing and propaganda, basically. So there's the sense of freedom, or the sense to do things was technically still a male decision. And what I discussed is the solution being, okay, obviously female-male thing it's probably not the most workable thing, obviously. So instead of being a male versus female thing, how about one person gets to stay home, one person doesn't get taxed, and the other person works. So one person can stay home, look after children, cook the healthy foods, and the male, female, 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 male, male in the relationship gets to decide who that is. That would be a solution, possibly. It might not spiritually make sense, but it hasn't been practically tried. That's what we got to the conclusion of. So yeah, let's keep going forward.
Even though feminists are trying their best to tear down masculinity, women will always find masculine men attractive. A 2019 study found that the more developed a country is, the more its women are attracted to facial masculinity. Pretty ironic that the countries with the most feminism also have the biggest desire for masculine men. And the only way you're going to become more masculine is by having more testosterone. Of course, that starts with optimizing your lifestyle, but a great supplement to help you out with that is called Kingmaker. I'm friends with the creator of Kingmaker, and he made Kingmaker to beat the testosterone supplement to end all testosterone supplements. I've been taking Kingmaker before working out and doing Muay Thai, and it has been
Muay Thai! Fuck yeah. This is an ad, by the way, guys, but Muay Thai.
A game changer. It feels less like a nootropic and more like I just have unlimited energy, more stamina, and I can just get more work in. I am really impressed. That's because Kingmaker contains 12 clinically studied ingredients in the right doses, so it actually makes a difference, unlike most fake supplements. On top of that, the serving size of Kingmaker is 5 capsules a day. Although that may sound like a downside, if the serving size was just 1 or 2 capsules a day, it would be impossible for you to get the right doses of each ingredient for it to actually make a difference. And yet that's what every other fake testosterone supplement does. This is also why Kingmaker is not cheap. Because it's made in America with real ingredients in the right doses with third-party testing, it costs as much money to make Kingmaker as what other fake testosterone.
Oh, $117. Holy snap, that's expensive. By the way, we watched all the ads, guys, because it supports Tyson, who made this documentary. So obviously we're not going to skip this, but interesting. $117. Is it worth it? I don't know. Never tried it.
Testosterone supplements are selling for. So if you want to be more masculine, if you want to promote lean muscle growth and all the other benefits that
if you want to be more masculine, take this pill.
come with higher testosterone, scroll down, click the link below, and pick up some Kingmaker now. Thanks to Kingmaker for sponsoring this video. Before the Rockefellers got involved, feminists in the early 1900s had some pretty legitimate reasons to want change. Back then, women weren't legally allowed to own property or votes. They weren't allowed to work outside of their homes. And if they managed to start making money from home, they weren't allowed to keep any of that money either. They didn't even have the right to take custody of their own children without their husband's permission. And even though the early feminist movement had a lot of shortcomings, like completely ignoring the rights of African American women, by the 1960s, it had already brought a lot of real positive change to American society. Now women were allowed to vote, own property, and even work if they wanted to. But for you, the Rockefeller family, that was just not enough. You didn't just want to give women the choice to work if they felt like it. If you left it up to them, only a small percentage would want to join the workforce. And you needed millions, remember? You needed to convince as many women as possible that they didn't just want equal rights. No, they need to be just as tough, ambitious, career-minded, and successful as men. You needed to convince them that men were...
Women must become men. No more women, just men. Just men. Men. By the way, I'm just having a bit of fun here, but yeah, that's the vibe.
The enemy. That by getting jobs, having casual sex, being single, not having kids, getting divorced, breaking down the family unit, that they were finally getting back at men for the centuries of cruel oppression. You needed...
If this is like, let's just say this is all true, right? Everything he's saying is true. That means there's the Rockefeller family are out there, like making like choices where it basically affects all of humanity for their own like power and profit. Is that a believable thing? Is that crazy? Is it crazy to think that?
Needed to turn the idea of being a homemaker and a mother into the worst possible case scenario in the minds of women. A hard feat. But luckily you are the Rockefeller family, remember? You've got billions of dollars. You're friends with all the most influential people on earth. The American government are your marionettes. All you need to do to make feminism your biggest money maker ever is to throw a little money around.
Attack the family first. Okay, this will be interesting because this is a big topic right now. Conservatism is the attack on the family, the nuclear family.
When Big Daddy Rockefeller was taking over the American education system, he needed a way to influence the people in control of public education. And what better way to do that than to donate a buttload of money to those organizations, and then tell them that you'll take it away if they don't do what you say. And it worked! Fast forward to the mid-1900s, and now it was time to target women next. So you follow the same playbook. The first thing you had to attack was the notion of having kids. Why? Because having kids keep women at home, and you need them out in the factories, remember?
Kids bad. Kids very bad. No more kids. Wow, that's basically like me expressing outwardly in a very aggressive way what the Rockefellers were like. Hey, but it still blows my mind to think, if this is all true, that there's a family out there who are that like clinical, that like precise, and that like they're like puppeteering all this stuff, and because they've got all this money, they can do that. I mean, I guess it's not out of the reality of the world, right? Like, if you do have all this money, you could achieve some pretty crazy stuff. Crazy.
Remember? That's why you needed American women to stop having so many kids. And that's where family planning came in. As far back as the 1940s, the Rockefeller family has been one of Planned Parenthood's biggest supporters. And
wow, did you hear that? So, abortion was supported by the Rockefellers back in the 1940s. And from the, have you guys seen, there's a documentary called Human Zoo. It talks about the Americans in the 1920s and the eugenics movement. And initially, abortion was created to basically euthanize, like kill African-American babies because they didn't want African-Americans. Because back then in the eugenics movement in the 1920s, the white Americans believed that everyone that wasn't a specific race, like their skulls were smaller and their brains were smaller. So they were like, we don't want those people, so let's abort their babies. If you haven't seen that documentary, it's by Discovery Channel. It's called Human Zoo. It's very dark, but it is a extremely eye-opening documentary that I recommend everyone watch because it gives you a real perspective. This stuff started from the Darwin family, natural selection, evolution, and it spread throughout the whole scientific community. All the top universities in America in the 1920s all believed in this. They all thought scientific racism was the way. And then, obviously, World War II happened, and basically all this stuff got stamped out. Apparently got stamped out. But did it get stamped out, or has it just gone underground? Because it's always better to do things behind the scenes than in front of the scenes. Because if you don't do things in front of the scenes, it's obvious and people can revolt. Actually, no. This I've just remembered. The only reason the eugenic movement stopped working was because the Catholic movement. It was actually the Catholic movement in America in the 1930s finally snapped and were like, no, all men are equal, all humans are equal, doesn't matter the color of their skin. And it was actually the Christian Catholic movement that actually stopped eugenics. So for all those people who say they hate Christianity, without Christianity, the eugenics movement probably would have been more at the forefront of things. I mean, it definitely would have been, because as I said, there was a famous African American priest who was very notable. I don't even know his name. We can get this stuff up later. We can watch that. Actually, we should watch that documentary as well and do a live reaction. And yeah, if it wasn't for the Catholics in America, maybe it will still be eugenics. You're worried about the Nazis. Don't worry about the Nazis. The Americans were the one that started all this stuff.
They've made a lot of pretty weird propaganda, ads, to convince women that having kids keeps them poor and oppressed. Like this one taken from the Rockefeller Brothers Fund website on how poverty likes bigger families. Or this one on how overlarge families lead to poverty, ignorance, and then the cycle repeats. And none of this is really all that surprising when you consider the fact that the creator of Planned Parenthood, a feminist named Margaret Sanger.
Oh, wait, I didn't see your chat, sorry. We need artificial wombs, free women from pregnancy, free men from women. It's all conspiracy theory nonsense. It's coincidental. It's coincidental. You really believe that one of the most powerful families in the world at the time, who basically ran the entire industry, who paid for all this stuff, it's all coincidence, do you? Like, you really believe that? You want to free women from pregnancy, free men from women. What's the topic, bro? Flying Prince, what's up, brother? We are watching a new documentary that just came out called Feminism is a Scam. So the whole documentary is exploring the issues of feminism, basically. And right now they're talking about the Rockefellers and their involvement, their involvement with all this stuff. All the Rockefellers did was accelerate it. So you're saying... So what I'm getting from you, chat, is that you're saying that this was a necessary step in the progression of humanity. You're saying all this stuff happened for a reason. Like, it was the destiny of humanity to go this way. And you think that the end game, a soft push along where it was already going. So you think it was like the end game of humanity is to have artificial wombs. Yeah, all that shit is generally BS. Yes, okay. How did you come to this transhumanism baby? Mini-max eugenics. Wow. Transhumanizing babies, mini-maxing eugenics. Wow, okay. Interesting. Interesting.
Was actually a big supporter of eugenics, or the idea that inferior people shouldn't be allowed to breed. I wonder where we've heard that before.
Margaret Sanger then used the eugenics.
Yeah, I don't know why they keep bringing up, like, okay, I know why they bring up Hitler and they bring up Margaret, all these other people, but like, it didn't start from there. It started in the 1920s in America. So I hate how the Americans skip past their own history and go straight to Hitler because they want to deflect. Americans love deflecting that the eugenics movement was from Darwin and from this. It started in America. Like, basically, it's been around since Sparta, actually. Sparta technically started eugenics with the Gogi. So the Spartans used to take babies, and if the babies weren't at a particular circumstance of superior build, they would legit chuck these babies, or they would leave babies to die or chuck them off cliffs. This is like one of the first known eugenics, and they would do this because they wanted ultimate warriors. Okay, here we go. It is the logical conclusion. The reason eugenics gets a bad name was because they jumped the gun based on bad science and its implementations. So you're saying all the stuff that happened in the 1920s onwards was scientists getting a bit too horny for eugenics and were like, and jumped the gun basically and like destroyed the branch of eugenics in a really bad way, because obviously they went down the whole like, let's kill everyone and let's kill everything kind of way. Interesting thought. Very controversial thought. Very spicy thought. Okay, interesting. The Rockefeller family is known for some corrupt shit. Yeah, they are. They definitely are.
eugenics movement to establish Planned Parenthood.
So in the 19 teens and 20s and 30s, eugenics was a very popular idea among people who were educated and elite. And so Sanger took this idea that there were some people were fit and some people weren't, and she connected it to population control with the slogan, quality, not quantity. And so
wow, that was the slogan, quality, not quantity. Oh.
Her idea was that really this was going to save, you know, the human race, that we were going to breed people who are of a higher, quote unquote, quality, instead of just having lots of people.
But just supporting Planned Parenthood wasn't going to be enough to...
Wow. Just as I said, it was the opinion of the elites and a majority of people in the 1920s, not majority of people, a lot of people in the 1920s that eugenics, the way they were doing eugenics is a good thing, which is why the Catholics had to stand up and stop it all. It's quite obvious ethnocentrism is stupid since you are a low-quality specimen of any ethnicity. Okay. Pretty much, it got hijacked by ethnocentrists since it's aligned with their ideology. Ah, okay.
Turn America feminist. You also needed to convince women that they need to be out there.
Whoever you are in chat, I really appreciate your like knowledge on these matters.
Working. That doing anything traditional like staying home or having kids was just them bowing down to the patriarchy.
Yeah, I think it was definitely important that women have the right to work and the right to vote, and those were two pretty pivotal rights that women, I believe, should have access to. But I think that the pendulum has swung too far, and now modern feminism is actually really quite destructive for men, but especially for women too.
And the more you thought about it, the more you realized.
Okay. So that's Shannon's final opinion on the matter, which is very interesting.
That this form of extreme feminism wasn't just good for the workforce. No, there were loads of other benefits to breaking up the traditional family unit as well. As long as there have been billionaires, there have been people who hate billionaires. And the 1960s was no exception. Back then, the hippies were in full swing protesting against war, inequality, racism, and everything in between.
I hate to do this to you guys, but please give me 2 minutes. I just need to go do something. I'll be right back. Appreciate you waiting around. We'll start straight back into it.
It seemed like the entire country was united behind some or another cause. And all this public unity was making the wealthy elite nervous. And as one of the richest families in America, you knew that it was only a matter of time before the pitchfork swinging plus redirected their collective anger onto you. You couldn't fly under the radar forever. Not when so many people were trying to improve society and make America a fairer place. Something had to be done. Something big had to happen to divide Americans, rile them up, and make them fight against each other instead of against you. Something like radical feminism. See, more than just telling women they should have equal rights and opportunities as men, radical feminism goes a lot further. It teaches women to hate men, that man's only purpose on earth is to hurt and put women down, that being masculine is toxic, that men are responsible for all the bad in the world. And all those values women used to uphold, well, they're nothing more than systems of oppression.
There's no coherent goal to modern feminism, you know, it's largely just to be angry, to be upset about something and keep pushing this idea forward that men and women are equal. And it just ties back to the whole, like the goal being pushed forward anyway. There's never supposed to be a coherent end. It's more just to be divisive and, you know, further push along an agenda. We just exist in a time where it's like complete and total tribal mindset. You know, it's us versus them. And with feminism, you get to paint really clear lines of what you're supposed to believe, with, you know, men and women being the exact same. And if you exist as like a strong male, you're automatically the opposition to that, just for simply existing, right? Nothing you inherit.
What do you guys think, chat? Do you guys feel that let me just read your thing. Blah, blah, blah. So having more kids means you spread out your resources, you get lower quality of education and lower potential output. As the world's industries develop, you need less uneducated workers within developed worlds. So either you have less kids and educate them so they become productive, or you get a bunch of kids who you can't afford, or you get a bunch of kids who you can't afford to educate and will not find jobs because of that. Having women in the workforce also increases your output, and frankly, they were very dependent on men before feminism. Very, very fascinating comment from you. Wow.
Apparently did or said, but the symbol of a modern
By the way, I will say it again, I appreciate your input in the chat because it is quite mind-blowing hearing your opinion.
Strong man that cares for his family and maybe his wife doesn't work and all that stuff. I mean, that is the opposition to modern feminism. And that's the same playbook that spawned, you know, it's not enough to be not a racist, you have to be anti-racist, right? It's the same ideological teachings. And the intent of that, again, is to achieve specific political and material goals from corporate standpoint and from political standpoint, which are largely one and the same nowadays.
This is my friend Rob Oliver, by the way. He's the one behind Kingmaker because it's his mission to redefine how men see themselves and masculinity. I'll link to his Instagram rob the bank below. Radical feminism was the thing you needed to pit everyday Americans against each other, thus taking all the attention off of you. And so, together with the Carnegies and Fords, two of the other richest and most influential families—
the Carnegies and the Fords, wow. Two powerful families who basically shaped the entire world.
In America, you created something that would change America forever: women's studies. An academic field that studies the many ways
women's studies
have been oppressed, why men and society oppress them, and how they can make it stop. You poured millions of dollars into creating entire women's and gender studies departments, where professors and researchers could publish all sorts of groundbreaking reports about how sexism is the reason for all the problems in women's lives. Thanks to women's studies, women weren't just hating men because of some propaganda or clever advertising anymore. No, they were being told their hatred of men and traditional families was scientifically justified. It legitimized them feeling like a victim. You even got major
scientifically justified man-hating
women's magazines like Cosmo to write fake stories about how great, liberating, and empowering radical feminism was. And this deep-rooted hatred for men was great for business too. In the early 1900s, just 20% of all women had some sort of paying job outside of their homes. Today, more than 75% of women between the ages of 25 and 54 have jobs. Should women be able to make money if they need to? Of course. But at the end of the day, you got what you wanted. Thanks to this new source of obedient female wage slaves, the overall supply of workers went up. Not only could you keep fueling your corporate empire with labor, but you were also able to push everyone's salaries down too. With a higher supply of workers, there was always someone willing to work for cheaper. But that's not all, because the government benefited too. With women working, the government was generating way more tax revenue. For you and your buddies, things couldn't be better. But for regular Americans, things couldn't be worse. Because you know what happens when women hate men and men are told to hate themselves? The entire family unit breaks down. Since 1970, the marriage rate in America has gone down by over 60%.
Whoa, that's huge. That is a huge statistic. Wow.
Only 1 in 10 women in 1970 didn't have children by the time they went through menopause. Today, that number has doubled to 1 in every 5 women. Thanks to the Rockefeller-funded feminist movement, American women are too busy hating and competing with men.
There you go, guys. Rockefeller-funded feminist movement. The most powerful patriarchal family one of the most powerful patriarchal families in human history funded the feminist movement. Do you think, this is my question, do you think they did it for the kindness of their hearts and that they actually care about women? Yes. Do you also think that they did it for themselves? Also yes. Interesting to think about.
And American men are more confused than ever with what their role with women are, all to the benefit of the rich and powerful. Why else would some of the richest people in the world like Bill Gates donate hundreds of millions of dollars to feminist organizations? Out of the goodness of their hearts? You're right, you should know better by now, because nothing could be further from the truth.
Well, I suppose now, especially in relationships, now that women are working, we're finding ourselves...
Guys, just a quick update. TikTok have just suspended my access to live. So my live access has been suspended on TikTok for watching a reaction video on YouTube. God damn TikTok, why you do this? And I will not get my access back till tomorrow at 8:40 p.m. tomorrow is when I'll have my access restored. There you go, guys. You heard it here first. TikTok have shut down my TikTok live because I'm reacting to a YouTube video. This is how ridiculous America is right now. Because America is so hell-bent on controlling all the information, they put so much pressure on TikTok that any little bit of slightly spicy content is immediately shut down. Like, I haven't said a word, I haven't said anything rude. Bang. Banned. banned on TikTok Live. TikTok, stop bending to these rules. If they ban you, they ban you. Actually, they're in survival mode. Of course they're going to be doing this. This is what I mean. At the end of the day, if the elites want something to happen, they will make it happen. If they are, like, honestly, I'll tell you here first, guys. A lot of the information I discovered during the pandemic, blah, 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 came from TikTok. We knew about the pandemic a month before it was even announced on the news because we were watching TikToks of people in Wuhan talking about this virus and it's slowly spreading, and they were like, what the hell? And then we started posting it. And then it became this whole thing that came the pandemic because of the lockdowns, right? So what I'm saying is TikTok is getting shut down because they can't, like, there's too much freedom of information there. And that's why what Elon Musk did with Twitter is interesting, because buying Twitter and turning to X has allowed at least one mainstream platform to allow freedom of information, things to happen. But, I mean, there is some compelling evidence that this is also orchestrated by the elites, because they also want, they have power over everything, basically. So I got the hiccups. So I don't know what to believe. What did you say, chat? Let's have a look at this comment. Yes, it's purely coincidental. The detrimental stuff at least. Are you familiar with elite theory? No, I've never heard of elite theory. Please expand on elite theory.
In relationships where women have to contribute financially, they have to bring 50-50 to the table in a relationship and provide for themselves and their families. So working on top of bearing children and raising children, and then on top of that, we're also sending our children back to co-parent with the government in daycares and in schools. And I just kind of realized that the relationship dynamics now, because of modern feminism and pushing women into the workforce, that relationships aren't 50-50 anymore. They're like 80-20, where women are just like, go, 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 putting in so much. And we don't actually have the space and the capacity to drop into our feminine, into safe relationships and like nurture the essence of femininity as is. And that is one of the like core destructive consequences of feminism, which are really like impacting our children, and it just kind of goes down generations, which is really quite significant.
I actually didn't think about it that way.
I will get your thing up.
In this video,
elite theory. Okay, we'll look into this, but let's go to this first, and then we'll get into elite theory.
Or if as a woman you work and you raise a kid, then you're doing like more.
Why is my ABS not showing? Yep, cool.
More than 50-50. So that's really, really interesting.
Because the children as well, then you're not being raised by the mom, you're not being raised by the dad, because you're both kind of working. Then it's like you're essentially giving up that autonomy of your child to like co-parent with the government and then have someone else's ideologies like imprinted into them. And it's really like disruptive of the family unit, just because it's really hard now to have a woman like present staying at home, because there are so many women in the workforce and we need to work more in order to, we've kind of co-created that.
Modern women are miserable. That's the title.
Even after more than 50 years of all this radical feminism, women today still aren't happy. In fact, women today are actually a whole lot unhappier than they were back in the 1970s. If you ask a feminist, they'll probably tell you that it's because the patriarchy still exists, when in reality, it's most likely those very same feminist beliefs that are actually making women miserable. Like the fact that casual sex leads to depression, low self-esteem, and lower life satisfaction, or that taking hormonal birth control is linked to higher suicide risk, or that married couples are actually much happier than unmarried couples or single adults, even though feminists love telling everyone that it's the exact opposite.
I think it's super critical, especially for women. Like my wife will tell you she feels most at home when everything's like generally taken care of and she's able to focus on giving the girls what they need, like in terms of emotional attention, stability, feeding them, like all of that stuff. And if you look through history too, that was largely the norm. Women often raised the families and men often provided. And I think that's right. Like, I think that's biologically right. I think that's logically correct. And it's lost today. And I think you get a lot of just broken culture as a result.
At the end of the day, the feminist movement.
It's funny how they had a man in that B-roll earlier as an example, women having a meltdown. That is quite funny, actually. Yeah, you're right.
It did in fact give women equal rights, which was absolutely necessary. But it also convinced women to trade this for this.
A feminist would argue that if women don't work, then they become dependent on the man and stuff like that. What are your thoughts on that?
I totally agree that women should have the right to work, and I think there's a lot of nuance in this conversation. I think maybe before women were too codependent on men, perhaps because he couldn't work, and now the pendulum has swung the other way, and now we're hyper independent. We're not taught to surrender to a safe man and allow the masculinity to protect and provide for us in this feminine space. It's just really quite sad, because there's a beautiful dance between the masculine and the feminine, when the masculine plays that role and when the feminine leans into a nurturing femininity. I think intrinsically men have this desire to protect and provide. You know, the feminine likes and provides that like comfort and safety for the family and raising children and bearing children, and we've been given.
It's great to hear Shannon speak longer on these topics, because lots of her videos are quite short format, but to hear her speak like at length about this topic is actually quite interesting. She's a very intelligent woman, and good on her.
And this amazing gift to be able to bring life into the world, and in itself is like.
We actually were going to interview her, have her at the podcast. We're going to fly her over from wherever she was living when she was living in Australia. We actually were in communication, so we were going to line up a talk, and it didn't happen. But we should still get her on. But if you check out her Instagram, she's pretty cool. She's a mother now, and she's got a really cute kid, and they just live in some forest or something like that, some rainforest, and doing fun things. It's pretty cool. It'd be a pretty cool childhood.
Is something that's so overlooked, and we've almost got to a point where we like the feminist movement is like telling women that we actually don't need men at all to like create life, and we can just have like a sperm donor, and we can do it ourselves, and it's just gotten like.
In my opinion, I'm just reading chat. In my opinion, the socialization of men not catching up to the modern environment is a grave disservice to men. In my opinion, the socialization of men not catching up to the modern environment is a grave disservice to men. Yes, because you have this thing called the incel movement, where you have a part of the male population who are basically incels. And, for example, the recent stabbing in Bondi was carried out by an incel. An incel for someone is someone that's in a voluntary celibate. So someone who basically can't get a girlfriend, can't get a woman, basically, who want women, who... They initially wanted women, but then they've black-pilled themselves. Now they don't want anything to do with women. They kind of hate women, and hence why they go out and carry out these atrocious acts like stabbing women. So that's just one example. Red pillars need to be expunged. A lot of feminists complain are overgrown, but there's an inkling of truth to their discontent with men. Red pillars need to be expunged. The only problem with everything you're saying is it goes against the Hermetic principles. So it goes against one of the most ancient philosophies that has guided humanity, probably more than any other philosophy. You're directly going against Principle 7 with your statements. And the Hermetics believe if you go against the Hermetic principles, you're basically going against reality, like the universal objective reality, which sounds pretty dogmatic, but there's an element of truth in that as well. But I'm not completely denying what you're saying. Like, I'm not shutting down what you're saying, but I'm saying your current opinion, like, I wouldn't wholeheartedly believe it. But I wouldn't wholeheartedly believe anything in life. But that in particular, I don't think it's like a guiding light to live your life by, because it goes against the principle number 7 of the Hermetic philosophical system of the universe, which is a pretty powerful philosophy. Look at the reality you're in. Do you think you can put feminism back in the bottle? No, of course not. And I'm not saying we do put feminism back in the bottle. I'm saying we find different ways to do things. I think the issue is the hyper-feminism. The hyper-feminism that is being, funded by particular groups of power. But it might not even be an issue. We're just exploring here. Like, we're exploring the simulations of the mind. Where can we go from this? So it is very, very interesting to think about. But I'll put this chat like that. Yeah, it is interesting to think about. I'll give you that. So beyond backwards, but yeah, just by nature, women. Fem cells are definitely a problem. Yes, fem cells are also a problem. Look, it goes both ways, but I think The difference between femcells and incels is that incels are typically going to be more violent, physically violent, where femcells will be more mentally violent and like systematically violent. So they're obviously they're both pretty bad. They're actually both really bad. See, I'm still learning as I think, right? But yeah, they're both pretty bad.
And have this incredible gift to create and nurture life, and we can't do that unless we're in a safe, protected environment, which is created by the masculine. Women are like scared to surrender and scared to like have a male like provide for them because they're so used to like.
Out of curiosity, so should we just give in to the ultra feminism? Like, do you think if all men just went full simp mode and just were like, okay, everything that feminists say is completely 100% gospel, we're going to do everything that what I'm observing is that incels would be genocided in a way they're right to be black-pilled. Yes, I agree. Incels are going to genocide themselves, really, aren't they?
Men that haven't really stepped up in their life or have X amount of like traumas or like all sorts of dynamics have been skewed in the past.
First off, I think it's really important that men just accept responsibility of everything, period, right? So this isn't like women have made men super weak, or because of feminism, men are now, like disenfranchised or watered down or whatever. But there's clearly a societal impact when you train a generation of women to be the same as men. So when you tell them they're the same as men, and that goes to like birth control and sexual relations.
Nope, the feminazis should also be expunged since they are parasitic and antisocial. Okay, you have a very interesting perspective of the world, and I really appreciate you, whoever you are. I really adore your contributions to the chat tonight. You've really, really explored my mind and helped me a lot. So thank you for being here, whoever you are. As I said, I want my stream to be open to the ultra left and the alt right. Like I want an alt right with a dash of ultra woke left. I want both of you guys in here so we can build a bridge and kind of like really talk and flesh out all the ideas without this stupid culture war. Let's just talk. Let's just chit chat. Let's just figure out what we're all about. Let's figure out if there's any sort of like resonation. Let's get something together. Let's create some unity. Let's see what happens. Let's just see what happens.
And when you start putting all those pieces together, you get a really, really up generation of men as a result, because women are playing this other game. You look at it biologically too again here. This sexual commitment, right? Like if a woman has sex historically before birth control, it is a potential 9-month commitment for them to house a child. Men do not bear that same responsibility biologically. Men do not need to carry children. And birth control has essentially overwritten this and messed with hormones, and it basically gets women active.
I will say that birth control is, I'm definitely a little bit anti-birth control. I think the risk to strokes, the hormonal risks, even the way it changes the way you perceive men, all these things are quite scary. Who needs unity with genetic and social dead ends, really? Who needs unity with genetic? I mean, I think the idea of unity is quite fun, spiritually speaking. And philosophically, the idea of unity does sound quite fun. Manchester United.
Like men, right? And it gets women sleeping around more often. And the impact that has on, like, then men can no longer find the person they want to be the mother of their child, the person they want to be their wife, because the game is just like all over the place. And so that's when you get this whole incel culture of like, women are horrible and every woman, and then it breeds even worse things. Like the modern hip hop world, I joke about this all the time, but like Future, the artist, is a side effect of modern feminism. Like the whole like, he's a meme, and it's like the whole code of Future that, never love these girls, the objects, blah, blah, blah. That could be presented as a side effect of modern feminism. I think the whole thing's fascinating, and it's just so destructive, and we're just at where we're at, really. Like, I don't see a path off it or a path backwards, but that's the end result we have.
Look at this guy's house. This guy's obviously bowling out. He's got like bloody Amazon boxes all over his kitchen table. He's got a nice like modern table, like cool shirt and little necklace, little hair gelled up. This guy's obviously bowling.
We have women acting in a very masculine manner, and as a result, you get men in a very feminine energy. And as a result,
I will say that I went to Melbourne recently, and I did notice a lot of feminine men. Like, being from Adelaide, you don't really see that, but in Melbourne, God, men were wearing G-strings. They were like wearing lace. Like, I was mind blown. It was like I was in a different planet. But that was very interesting to see, especially the G-string thing. That was a bit weird, but I mean, each to their own. But I just wasn't used to it. Weird means not normal. Like, I don't normally see this, but in Melbourne, I saw it everywhere, especially on Chapel Street. Very, very culturally different to Adelaide.
Society, more or less.
And if that's what some women truly want, then more power to them. But let's be honest, most women would probably rather be in their feminine if they had to choose.
I heard you're single.
Yes,
why is that?
I am. Because I think not all men, a lot of men right now act like women and they just want more. Bring back the patriarch. I want to stay at home. I want to take care of my kids.
What do you want? What do you believe?
I want a man to take care of me.
So you want to be a housewife?
I want to be a housewife.
Okay.
Yeah.
The old traditional way?
Traditional. I'll do it. I don't mind. I'll do it.
All right, let's say you meet the guy that does all that. Like, he's willing to take you in. You basically be the woman to take care of everything.
Yeah.
Now, does he...
The thing about this, right? In the 1960s, I think the average male made around what was today's equivalent of $350,000. So there was a lot more men who could offer this type of life. Now it's completely opposite. Now there's a small portion of men who could offer this type of life to particular women. So if you're going to be that woman, you're going to have to be a high, tier woman to get that. So, but before, this is more accessible to a lot more people. It's an aberration. The traditional housewife doesn't exist. It's an aberration. Okay, interesting thought. It's interesting thought.
You got complete control over you? Like saying, all right, delete your Instagram. You can't be dressing all out on the streets.
Here's my thing. I'm not going to be dressing all and having Instagram. If I found the one and he gives me everything I need, he doesn't even have to ask me for that. I already did it.
I like this one.
You'll delete it?
Oh, yeah, for sure, without him even having to ask.
What about he wants stuff every time?
Yeah, okay, yeah, for sure, yeah, 100%. 100%. If he provides for me, he's a good husband, he's loyal, everything, he's good to our kids. What more could you ask for in a man? That's what I need. I need a provider.
And guys, if you're watching this, don't forget, if you want to increase your testosterone, of course you want to start with all the lifestyle stuff like exercise and getting rid of all processed foods. But if you want a boost on top of that, check out Ross.
God damn, this ad has been played so many times.
Brand Kingmaker. It's the best on the market, it works shockingly well, and you can pick it up on Amazon with the link below.
Without the post-war peace dividend, there is no way for it to exist. They only existed for the middle-class boomer generation. Okay, so it was like a short-term thing. But what about before that, in the medieval times? Was it a house? What was it like then? It never existed in any other period of history for any wide population. So what... I guess you're right. Thinking about human history now, looking back at human history, I guess you're correct, but the women definitely in ancient times and definitely had more of a role to look after the family and kids. Women did farming. That's true. The women did do a lot of farming. Yes, that's true. The women did do farming. And they were gatherers as well. So they were doing work. And very physical work. Yes, you're right.